Welcome to Voices of Reynolds, a podcast series devoted to celebrating the college's 50th anniversary. I'm Marianne McGee. And you know, one of the defining qualities of Reynolds is our wonderfully diverse student population by age, race, culture, and language. And for Reynolds students from all over the world, their English as a second language, ESL class, is one of the most important and powerful classes they'll take at the college. And helping us better understand that are two really wonderful guests. Our guests today are Marty Watkin, co-program head for ESL at Reynolds, and Lori Weinberg, now retired but never forgotten, always loved, former ESL program coordinator. And Marty and Lori, thank you so much for being here. For native English speakers, an ESL class is something we may never get a glimpse of. And you know, Lori, I kind of want to start with you on this because the experiences of newcomers to the States are incredibly varied. But share with us, what are some of the circumstances that bring students to the ESL program?
Okay, thank you, Marianne. First of all, I think it's important to understand that Richmond is a designated refugee resettlement city, and that's determined based on which cities have access to public transportation, affordable housing, and those types of things. So we've always had a rich diversity of students based on whatever group might be coming in as refugees. Most recently, of course, we're seeing an influx of Afghan families. And so the largest portion, I would say, of our program has been refugees who are also immigrants because they're coming to this country and are not planning to return to their country for the most part. And refugees, once they become permanent residents, then they can move on to becoming citizens, just as immigrants generally can do the same thing. We also serve international students who come on international student visas. Of course, that's slowed down in the last 2 years because of the pandemic, but we are still getting international students, and people get confused sometimes about the difference, but what's an international student? In our world, an international student is someone who comes on a visa to be here temporarily, to get an education and return to their country.
But Lori, in the time that you have been here at Reynolds, what are some of the historical events? What plays out on the world stage that might bring students to Reynolds, to our campus, and to ESL classes?
Well, when I first started here in 1993, and I was teaching as a part-time instructor, the populations were primarily Vietnamese students. So I had a class once for a while, a couple of classes, that were like 99% Vietnamese with maybe one Korean student and one Russian student. So it follows whatever the waves are of what's going on in the world. So we were still getting refugees, you know, the overflow of refugees from the Vietnamese situation, the Vietnamese conflict, and then it moves to another conflict. I remember we had Bosnians and Serbians in the same class, but here it's a common ground. So the conflicts they had back there in their home countries were no longer the same conflicts that they had here. They could come together and become friendly with one another. It was not a real big issue, at least on the surface. I mean, but I found that was never an issue. So it was this great mixing of people on a common ground in a new place where they're not judged by rivalries or anything like that, or conflicts that they had in their home countries. I remember days when I had students in a class of 18 from 15 different countries in a class of 18. And then many languages, because as you know, even within a given country, people speak different languages and different dialects. So that was so impressive to me the year that I had all those students from so many different places. And it's just beautiful to see how they come together. And whether they're here as international students or not, that doesn't make a difference when they're in the ESL classroom.
Lori, that is fascinating. And I think this is what is so wonderful about the ESL program and the students who are coming. This new life that they're creating, with language being a part of that. Marty, talk to us a little bit about how ESL fits into this incredible cultural, familial change that our students are experiencing when they get here.
Well, if you are from particular countries, you may or may not have driven a car before, right? You may or may not have traveled a long distance before just to go to a store or to your school. So you might have had a more neighborhood approach to living. And most people who are coming over here with family groups aren't coming to live in houses. They're often moving into tiny apartments, at least to start, until they're able to sort of build up some sort of, I don't want to call it family wealth, but maybe some family financial stability. Is that a good way to say it, maybe? So. Yeah. So the beginning process of coming to the United States feels maybe initially like perhaps a taking away of physical possessions, and there may be a question in a lot of our students' minds or prospective students' minds, do I have to give away my culture? Do I have to give away my language if I'm going to learn this new language and this new culture? And we always want the ESL program to be one of those both and experiences for them, where they never have to feel concerned about speaking their native tongue on their breaks and with friends and making friends in other groups. So as people are having this experience of just having everything taken away, to find a little nest, a warm place where you can be yourself as you're learning and make mistakes and feel nurtured as a human being, and then take that knowledge back into your family in your tiny apartment and say, mom, dad, or children, whoever is the family member taking the class on that first wave, we can do this, we can learn. What I'm learning in class, I will then share with the rest of the family.
One of our teachers did a really wonderful thing in her class where she would make them on the last day of class, and this was a fairly low level, I think it was low intermediate class. We would often have parties at the end where people would bring in food from their countries and so on. But she would make the students go out, either individually or with a classmate, into the cafeteria or wherever, and they had to bring a student back into the class with them. And they would invite them with, there's like, oh, what do you mean, But it worked, and they would come in and they would get food, and they never had trouble bringing people in. And as strange as that may seem, I thought it was the most wonderful thing ever. So even if it was just for a moment that they were in that classroom enjoying this food, meeting strangers that had pulled them in. So things like that. I think we are a very welcoming college overall. And I'm excited to see that, which is not to say there are never any issues. I just feel like the students just sort of find their way, as Marty was saying, from starting in ESL and making these friendships and maybe going on to another class with a friend they've made. But it works. It works.
I tell you, the Reynolds has a lot to be proud of over 50 years, and our English as a second language program is a crowning jewel to that. So thank you both. And we want to thank all of our ESL instructors, past, present, and future, and of course the fantastic students we've had the honor to help educate and support. And thank you both for being here, and thanks to everybody for listening to these Voices of Reynolds, and we'll see you next time.